evening. As requested by a member of this board and in accordance with our mission to be agents of change, we are here to provide you with our research presentation. Those watching online may follow along by referring to the posted version on our website or social media. Those of you here have been provided with copies of the presentation so that you can also follow along. We trust that you will listen and provide a summary for community members on the Cobb K-12 site as was done in the district's official recap of public comments for the March 18th meeting. The renaming of Joseph E. Wheeler High School would serve to better accurately represent the student population and the overarching values of the Cobb County school system. Joseph E. Wheeler, a general in and symbol of the Confederacy, does not and has never represented the values or students of the school. Additionally, its renaming would be just one of the many Confederate monuments that are being removed across the country. Considering this, by not changing the name, you are communicating that you agree with the commemoration of this person, and subsequently have found nothing wrong with the relevant historical data under which the name was adopted and in what it continues to perpetuate. Our neighboring district, Atlanta Public Schools, recently renamed Forest Hill Academy, named after a Confederate soldier and the first Grand Wizard of the KKK. Forest Hill also worked with Joseph E. Wheeler in the cavalry of the Army of Tennessee. If their school can be renamed, why can't ours? Our initiative has been met with overwhelming community support, including approximately 6,056 signatures on our most prevalent surveys. Teachers, students, alumni, and community members in and outside of Cobb concur that we do not agree with the values that this name reflects on our school or on Cobb County as a whole. Furthermore, the name does not meet the current Cobb naming standard FDCR Rule A2B, which states the person must have made a significant educational, historical, or social contribution in the community. We appreciate your time and are looking forward to seeing your recap and understanding of the material presented this evening.
Good evening. My name is Jake McGee. I would like to begin by going over what we know about Joseph Wheeler's life. I'll be covering important topics, highlights, and pointing out what we can take away from all of this. Joseph E. Wheeler was born in Augusta, Georgia in 1836. His father, Joseph Wheeler Sr., was a banker, cotton broker, and real estate speculator. The younger Wheeler, who our school is named after, was destined to become a businessman, but he chose instead a career as a soldier early on. When the Civil War broke out, he joined the cavalry and was stationed mainly in Tennessee, not in Georgia. He served as the commander of the Confederate Army in Tennessee as well, not Georgia. He fought in Cobb County once, crossing the Chattahoochee in an attempt to destroy the railroad William T. Sherman was using to supply his force in Chattanooga. After the Civil War, he settled in Alabama, not Georgia, where he served as a state representative and worked as a farmer and a lawyer. So, Joseph Wheeler's acquired connection to our area as a school namesake rests solely on his limited service as a commander of the Confederacy. While he was born in Augusta, this can't really be considered a personal contribution to Cobb County. He went on to serve in the Spanish-American War after being appointed by President McKinley and as a general in the Philippine-American War. In 1900, he retired to New York, and after his death in 1906, he was buried in Arlington Cemetery. The later portion of his life only re-emphasizes that his connection to our state, much less Cobb County, is not only limited, but entirely dependent on his efforts as a Confederate. He didn't donate the land on which Wheeler was built either. While his impact could potentially be seen as historical, it is difficult to make the argument that one battle near Cobb County is significant, and according to the standard, the historical time must be within the community. In the end, Joseph Wheeler as a figure does not hold up to today's naming standards, which we find provides ground to reevaluate the name and how it reflects our community today. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rachel Toole. Continuing with Jake's point, Joseph Wheeler's connection being tied directly to the Confederacy brings us closer to the heart of this issue at hand. We often have those same facts about Joseph Wheeler's life used to only explain why he's an honorable man or to argue that he turned himself around, but that isn't actually what this is about. This issue isn't about the morality of Joseph Wheeler as an individual. When his name was selected for our school in 1964, nearly 60 years after his death, he wasn't chosen for his service as a state representative of Alabama or as a general in the Spanish-American War. He was chosen as a symbol of a particular set of ideas and values, just like every namesake is. Some are chosen for their perseverance or commitment to uplifting their community. However, in the middle of the modern civil rights era, as the county was struggling to formulate an adequate plan for integration, Joseph Wheeler, the man who was connected to this area by his service as a Confederate general, was chosen as a symbol of Confederate ideals. The first yearbook from our school simply states about our namesake, "This is the place which bears the name of Confederate General Joseph E. Wheeler." No one knew him as anything else but a Confederate even back then, partly because that part of his life is likely the precise reason he was selected as the namesake. His name was used for the purpose of exclusion, which becomes particularly clear when you consider the context of the time period, something that will be discussed later. The history of his life as an individual is well preserved. His house in Alabama is owned by the Alabama Historic Commission, which you can visit to learn about the full story of his life. By evaluating what message his name was used to send when it was placed on our school building, we will not be erasing the life story of Joseph Wheeler. The name of our school wasn't used to commemorate his whole
30
life,
seconds.
only to immortalize his service in the Confederacy and use his name as a symbol of Confederate ideals, which do our student body a disservice today. Overall, when we discuss the name of our school, it's important to keep in mind that this is no longer about Joseph Wheeler as an individual, but what values and messages his name represents. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Sydney Spessard. An essential step in understanding our efforts is to remember what the Confederacy represented. To do so, I'd like to read you a quote from a report written by the Southern Poverty Law Center. There is no doubt among reputable historians that the Confederacy was established upon the premise of white supremacy, and that the South fought the Civil War to preserve its slave labor. Its founding documents and its leaders were clear. Our new government is founded upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery's subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition, declared Confederate Vice President Alexander H. Stephens. It's also beyond question that the Confederate flag was used extensively by the Ku Klux Klan. George Wallace, Alabama's governor, unfurled the flag above the state capitol in 1963 shortly after vowing segregation forever. In many other cases, schools, parks, and streets were named for Confederate icons during the era of white resistance to equality. End quote. Now, there have been many attempts to redefine the Confederacy as a noble endeavor, one that was necessary to protect the Constitution and to defend the rights of slaveholders from Northern aggression. This is known as revisionism. As the SPLC states, this deeply rooted but false narrative is the result of many decades of revisionism in the lore and even textbooks of the South that sought to create a more acceptable version of the region's past. The Confederate monuments and other symbols that dot the South are very much a part of that effort. End quote. Not only did Wheeler himself perpetuate revisionism in his own speeches, much of the objection to this name change is rooted in revisionist ideals as well. We must not forget Alexander H. Stephens' words. The great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man. Slavery subordination to the superior race. His words are clear. That is what the Confederacy represents. That is what a Confederate soldier represents. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Nina Kaseva. Racist beliefs found their roots in Confederate leaders, but since the intangible thoughts of long-gone soldiers proved to be a rather ineffective means of evidence, I would like to direct your attention to the more physical representations of Confederate motivations. The dedication of Confederate monuments and the use of Confederate names began shortly after the Civil War ended in 1865, but two distinct periods saw some very significant spikes. The early 1900s marked the enactment of Jim Crow laws in order to disenfranchise African Americans and resegregate society after several decades of integration that followed Reconstruction. The number of Civil War monuments in 1911 is approximately 3 times the number of monuments at the start of the century, with numbers rising almost immediately after the Plessy versus Ferguson trials. Additionally, the mid-1950s until the late 1960s, a time historically known to encompass the modern civil rights movement, also saw a spike in Confederate monuments. Keep in mind that this was also the same time period that Joseph E. Wheeler High School was named and established. I would like to conclude with an argument that we have heard countless times, that Wheeler was a brave soldier, that he didn't own slaves, and that he was simply fighting for his home. We counter this with the fact that our current issue isn't about the personal motivations of one soldier. It is clear that as a government, the Confederacy endorsed slavery and the idea of white supremacy. This is all clearly stated in the Confederate Constitution, Confederate state secession documents, and even in statements made by the Confederacy's leadership. The name of our high school symbolizes Confederate sentiments. Any symbol of the Confederacy, regardless of the individual intentions of the man behind the uniform or who he was before or after donning the uniform, is inconsequential. I implore you to look at the bigger picture, because the tangible evidence is right there before your eyes. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. I'm Caroline Hugh, and I'll be speaking today about the Cobb County School District in the 1960s. I obtained this research from the CCSD archives and from KSU professor Thomas Scott's book on Cobb. To start, I've said this many times before now, but the Cobb County School Board voted to integrate on March 1st, 1965, 11 years after the passage of Brown v. Board of Education, and this was 2 days before the federal mandated deadline. When they did vote, the board member representing Wheeler High School, Mr. Eugene Housley, dissented. I actually had a phone call with Mr. Housley, and he confirmed our facts and said the superintendent dissented as well. If you look through the CCSD archives from then, you'll see that the board had been educated repeatedly on the repercussions of continuing to defy the Civil Rights Act, and had received letters from parents urging them to comply. A later speaker of ours will walk you through a letter written by one of the board members, but, at its root, the decision to integrate was mainly financial, and the board postponed integration as long as they possibly could. You can see the begrudging compliance carry forward in the initial integration plan, which wouldn't have achieved full integration until 1970. They actually needed help from the Federal Department of Housing, Education, and Welfare to come up with an acceptable plan at all. Finally, the county celebrated a few holidays with significant ties to the Confederacy back then, including Robert E. Lee's birthday and Alexander Stephens' birthday, the vice president of the Confederacy. Does any of this indicate an environment that is welcoming or inclusive? Obviously not. So why should we assume our school was named with no ill intent? While we can never know exactly what was going through the board's minds when they named Joseph E. Wheeler High School, the atmosphere at the time heavily suggests that exclusion was their goal. And, even barring all of this historic context, you have students here today who are negatively affected by this name, and shouldn't that alone be enough for you?
Hello, my name is Anna Valencia. Following Caroline's statement, CCSD board member Tom Artburn wrote a letter in which he discussed that the board presented 3 different options to opt out of signing Form 441B, which would desegregate Cobb County schools. According to Cobb School Board Archives quote, the failure to sign this Form 441B would immediately delete from our finances approximately $2.5 million, end quote. In discussion of how to proceed, the board members discussed increasing taxes, cutting teacher salaries by 15%, and eliminating school bus services. Afterwards, they concluded that they would integrate the schools for the school year of 1966 to 67 to prevent from losing federal funding of $2.5 million. This meant that the board only chose to integrate the school system to receive needed economic aid, after realizing all plans to conserve money and effort to avoid integration wouldn't work. The next slide you see outlines the timing of the construction and establishment of Joseph E. Wheeler High School. On August 12, 1964, the board chose the name Wheeler High School without any community discussion. It was a decision made only by those in a position of power. On March 10, 1965, a petition was brought to the board to change the name to East Cobb Senior High. In 1965, the committee was denied the opportunity to have an open discussion. Today, we risk making the same mistake. We can choose to do things differently this time. When you know better, you do better.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Giselle Jackson. As we continue the discussion examining the climate, culture, and core beliefs of Cobb County at the point in history in which Wheeler received its name and was integrated, we thought it be most appropriate to hear about the experiences of someone closest to the issue, a Wheeler student who experienced this all firsthand. In a quote from a 1971 alumni who attended both East Cobb Junior High and Wheeler High School, they explained their knowledge, even before attending Wheeler, of the school's namesake, a namesake whose underlying purpose was seemingly more notable than the actions of the person holding the name himself. In addition to Wheeler High's name, she finds noteworthy the mascot and fight song of the junior high at the time. She says, quote, East Cobb Junior High, where I went, across the street, we were the rebels. Our mascot was a cartoon rebel general, and our fight song was Dixie. It wasn't very subtle. End quote. From Confederate mascots and songs at the middle school to our own school's climate that could be recognized even from across the street, the students' testimony alongside our historical context clearly display the ideals that were acceptable at the time. In addition, we were able to explore the early yearbooks of East Cobb Junior High from the years 1964 to 1969. The mascot previously described can be seen in a Confederate soldier uniform brandishing a belt labeled CSA, standing for the Confederate States of America. He's also depicted at times wearing an apron embellished with a Confederate flag. The cheerleading team held Confederate flags in their team pictures in the 1966 to 67 yearbooks and were known as the Rebelettes. Another photo from the 1969 yearbook shows a teacher hanging the 1956 Georgia state flag. This flag, according to the official Georgia Encyclopedia website, was changed in 1956 legislation so it would include the Confederate battle flag, a flag, might I add, that up until that time post-Civil War had been adopted by hate groups such as the KKK. As we look back on the actions of those in power and see that they were made in accordance with their beliefs at the time, I believe we can all agree that the actions we take now should represent the same when others look back on us. This begs the question, in alignment with the decision not to change Wheeler's name, what message we'd be sending and what beliefs we would be fighting for. Thank you.
My name is Darshini Sriman, and I'm will be speaking upon the context of Cobb when our school was named. In order to truly realize the intent of the naming of our school, we have to give context to the actions and sentiments of people living during that time. In 1965, the General Assembly voted to create MARTA as a system to serve the city of Atlanta as well as Clayton, Cobb, and other counties. Voters in Cobb, however, were not on board. At the time when CCSD voted to integrate, Cobb residents wanted nothing to do with MARTA. The vote spoke overwhelmingly to their desire to resist the changes that were happening at the time. The Atlanta magazine states that this was not just, quote, about transportation, they were referendums on race, unquote. Some parts of Atlanta's infrastructure were built at the convenience of one group of people and the inconvenience of another. According to history professor from Georgia Tech Ronald H. Bayer, the interstate highway, now called Downtown Connector, quote, gutted black neighborhoods by forcing the removal of many working-class black people from Central Business District, unquote. At this time, suburbia could be deemed untouched, had the power to negotiate what resided in their areas, yet the working-class black people didn't have the same say. Furthermore, the original plan of the interstate highway was designed to run straight through the Atlanta Life Insurance Company, a major black-owned business coincidentally owned by a former slave by the name of Alonzo Franklin Herndon. Along with all of this, a group of white citizens met at Sedalia Park Elementary to protest integration entirely and continued on by joining the KKK rally in Cobb. Taking all of this into account, hostility is an adequate word to
30 seconds.
to explain what the citizens of Cobb felt during this tumultuous time. The desire to remain separate permeated their lives so much that it affected their choice on whether to implement public transportation. Thank you.
I am Emma Jackson, a parent of 2 students in the Cobb County School District, as well as 2 grandchildren in the Cobb County School District. And I'm here to speak in support of this initiative. This group of students has spent a substantial amount of time not only creating and furthering this initiative, but have also been in communication with those of differing perspectives. From this, they have received various comments, the likes of which I will be addressing now. The first claim is that removing Confederate symbols is erasing history in the name of political correctness. However, this is not an attempt to erase history. This is an effort to end the endorsement of a symbol that has represented, since its inception, the subjugation of an entire race. In this particular instance, Joseph E. Wheeler's history is well preserved, as explained by a former speaker, but in general, these historical symbols belong in museums and other settings where people can learn the full history of slavery, the Confederacy, the Civil War, and Jim Crow. We are simply asking to stop the commemoration of discriminatory symbols. Additionally, some say the school has always been named after a Confederate leader. There's no need for change. It's just a part of the community. These students are as much of a part of the community as the name. It sends the wrong message to these students.
30 seconds.
Especially students of color, when their school honors someone with who was loyal to a government founded on the idea of one group of people being inherently superior to another and the right to enslave them. It also sends the wrong message to our community. We should look not only at the history of the school's namesake, but to our community's history. This school was not named shortly after the Civil War. It was named during the Civil Rights Movement, when many schools in this country were named after Confederate leaders as a protest against desegregation. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name is Sanaj Sanders. After hearing the historical facts and information brought up previously, it should be evident to everyone here that things need to be reformed on a county-wide scale, not just Wheeler. Direct action needs to be taken in order to carry out this reformation. This is why we call on the board to adopt a naming policy similar to adjacent districts such as Marietta City Schools, which I will quote here. If the board names a facility and it is later determined that the individual or entity for whom the facility/area is named was not the type of person that would promote the honor and integrity of the facility or the system as a whole, the board would have the power to change the name, whether or not a donation had been made. Another district with a similar guideline would be Gwinnett County Public Schools. As quoted from their naming policy, the first consideration of the board in name selections shall be the honor and integrity which the name will reflect upon the school. We also urge the board for a reinstatement of a previously dismantled committee dedicated to evaluating the names of facilities across Cobb in an evaluation of Wheeler High School's name. Our county would not be the first in Georgia to do this. Looking to our neighboring district, Atlanta Public Schools, who recently unanimously voted amongst their board to change the names of 3 of their facilities: Joseph E. Brown Middle School, named after a Confederate governor; Forest Hill Academy, named after a Confederate general and the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan; and Henry W. Grady High School, named after a journalist of the Confederacy who made arguments for the need for white supremacist ideology. I'd again like to
30
repeat
seconds.
what others have said before me. Knowing what the Confederacy stood for and the perpetuation of white supremacy through its figures shows that the majority by POC population of Wheeler and our school's values are not being accurately represented through our current namesake. It cannot be stressed enough the importance of implementing these changes into our district promptly, as this is long overdue.
Hi, I'm Lisa Spessard, and I'm a mom of 2 students in the Cobb County School District, and I have volunteered in all 3 of their schools for the last 13 years. I'm honored to be here tonight to support this initiative. Policies and procedures to examine current names and carry out name changes is something countless school systems and universities have in place. Requests for the school board to seriously consider a name change through actual renaming policy and committee formation is not unreasonable, unfounded, or unrealistic. For example, the Atlanta Public Schools renaming policy includes the following statement: when a facility is to be named or a name change is proposed, the board chair shall appoint a special committee to consider nominations and make a recommendation to the board. End quote. They have done this successfully. Johns Hopkins, the reputable research university, has a comprehensive report on naming and renaming principles that we have found both informative and inspirational. The report details the institution's 7 criteria for examining names. I'm going to read through a few of them for the sake of time, and as I do, I suggest thinking of the questions in regard to Joseph E. Wheeler. For purposes of this exercise, I'll be replacing all mention of the word university with Cobb County. Number 1, what do scholars substantially agree to be the person's prime legacies? 2, does the evidentiary record show that the person's prime legacies included conduct that
30
violates or contradicts Cobb County's mission and values? 3, what is the relationship of the person to Cobb County? And 4, what was the process used to apply the original name? For what was the honoree being recognized? I think it's pertinent that you examine these questions and others that contrast the history and circumstance presented to you this evening with the priorities and mission of the school district. Renaming schools and buildings has been done for decades throughout the country and our neighboring counties. We can do it too. Thank you.
Greetings, Cobb board members. My name is Ashley Ewalt. Changing our high school's name is more than just renaming a school, but it is about fostering a welcoming environment for students of all different backgrounds. What message are we sending to our community by continuing to honor this individual, especially now that you understand what he symbolizes and the values it perpetrates? Our high school, which has a 74% minority population and was ranked as the 6th most diverse public high school in Georgia, was named during the Civil Rights Movement to honor a Confederate. That should make many pause and question our current school system that refuses to acknowledge the harm this has on our student body. Our students of color should be equally represented throughout the county and feel as if they can tell people what school they attend without saying the name of a person who was loyal to a government that supported the idea that one race is superior to another. The school board refusing to change the title of our high school demonstrates that students of color are not valued as much as protecting a name. This is why students such as myself are beginning to lose faith in the educational system, and it's time for young voices to speak up against the blind perseverance of past ideologies. Not changing the name of a proud, diverse high school exemplifies a lack of effort in fostering a welcoming environment, and it's clear that our voices are not a priority. Our name should be a reflection of our values we wish to carry into the future. I am now going to read a survey respondent statement about this issue. It is important that we demonstrate to young minds that people of merit and of distinction get remembered and get honored. It is important that we do not continue to do so for those who were so blatantly opposed to integration and had racist and hateful messages and ideologies. The commemoration of a school to William does just that, and it hurts people of color as they see a racist being revered. Thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Harini Vijay, and I'm a junior at Wheeler High School. First of all, I want to thank all of you for listening to our presentation. While we would have preferred to present to you as an official board agenda item with a PowerPoint, we hope that you, as well as the listeners at home, have been actively following along with the provided printed PowerPoint slides. If you would like to view our presentation and the research our members have conducted, you can find it on our social media platforms and website. As a recap, the previous speakers provided information on naming procedures for Cobb County and other buildings. What we are asking for is not unheard of. Name changes happen all the time, and I want to emphasize that the current name change, as Zoe Shepard stated earlier, does not comply with Cobb County's current policies. More specific information concerning Joseph Wheeler was stated, but this movement is not directed as a personal attack. At the very least, as a Confederate general, that exact wording stated in the first yearbook, he represents hate and division, something that so clearly goes against the environment Cobb County has cultivated within its schools. Per the board's request, information has been provided regarding school naming procedures, Joseph Wheeler's history, the Confederacy's relation to this issue, the Cobb County School Board and Cobb as a whole in the 1960s, Wheeler High School's early years versus its current demographics, as well as the numerous support that this movement has. Now we respectfully ask to hear your perspective and see some real action. We would like an email at wheeler.namechange@gmail.com and a written response that details the actions that will be taken on this issue, whether that is reestablishing a committee, taking steps to evaluate naming policies, or simply setting up a meeting with us to discuss the next steps. As always, we are available to schedule time to meet with the members of this board and to listen to what you have to say. We continue to stand behind our desire to have open dialogue, as collaboration and transparency are key. Again, thank you, and we look forward to a detailed written response.
Hello, my name is Shweta Krishnan, and I'm a junior in the Magnet program at Wheeler High School. We are disappointed that in order to ensure our voices were heard, we had to prevent others from putting forth their opinions this evening. To anyone who planned to speak tonight, we apologize. Unfortunately, this was seemingly our only option. Our group respectfully requested to have our presentation added to the monthly board meeting agenda 3 times, and each time we were denied. Additionally, our representative requested for our presentation to be considered 3 times, and again, this individual was ignored. Most importantly, each member of our organization took the time to write an email explaining why we are passionate about the name change and what we have done to support this issue, and every email was ignored. While it is unfortunate that our efforts to start a discussion with the board are being disregarded, we will not let this deter us from continuing to put forth our opinions and ideas for change. The name change is an issue that we have been fighting for since last summer, and it will not be easily forgotten by August. We hope to continue this discussion in our community and show our passion for a name that will give equal representation for our entire student body. Thank you to everyone online who took the time to listen to our presentation tonight. We hope to gain your support to help us fight for what is right. Thank you.